If you're watching this video, know this. What you're about to see is no ordinary congressional debate. This is the story of how a single lie collapsed in seconds. Watch the video from start to finish, because this moment is rare in Washington. A collapse that happens when there's nowhere left to run. It all started in the House chamber. The lights were the same, the cameras were the same. C-SPAN was broadcasting live, just like always. But this time, something was different. Ted Lieu was speaking. His voice was calm. His tone didn't rise. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't banging his fist on the table. But that's exactly why it was dangerous. Because Ted Lieu doesn't shout. Ted Lieu builds. He frames his questions with logic, not emotion. And the person he was targeting was one of the most vulnerable to this kind of questioning, Patel. Patel was at the podium as FBI director, under oath, live on air, and as usual, he was on the defensive. When Ted Lieu asked his first question, nothing changed in the room. No one noticed with the second question either. But with the third question, something happened to Patel's face. Because Ted Lieu wasn't using classic political tactics. He didn't say, "Did you do this?" He didn't ask, "Why did you hide this?" Instead, he did this. He put Patel's own words in front of Patel. "You said this before. Then you said that. Now you're saying the exact opposite." And then came that sentence. One sentence. Short, clear, unavoidable. "Which is true, Director Patel." That's where the collapse began. Patel didn't answer. Actually, he did, but the words didn't make sense. There were words, but no substance. There was sound, but no direction. In the Congress Hall, in front of the cameras, an FBI director had been caught for the first time. Not just for lying, but because the lie could no longer be carried. Ted Lieu did not increase the pressure. He did not raise his voice. He simply remained silent. And that silence was deadly for Patel, because the audience now saw this. This was not a political conflict. This was not a right-left issue. This was the moment of contact with reality. All the shields Patel had used until now, national security, ongoing investigations, "I can't comment," all lost their function at that moment. Ted Lieu didn't ask anything new. He stayed on the same point, and Patel couldn't get out of there. That's why this moment went viral. Because people saw an FBI director not shouting, not running away, not angry, but collapsing while thinking. The internet loves that. But this wasn't just an internet moment. It was an institutional moment. Because Patel's collapse wasn't just about Patel. It was about what he represented. A mindset inherited from the Trump era. An understanding that prioritized loyalty over transparency. A reflex that saw those who asked questions as enemies, those who demanded accountability as aggressors. Ted Lieu knew this. That's why he didn't shout. Because some lies don't collapse when confronted, but when left exposed. At this point, we must ask, why is an FBI director so defensive? Why does a simple question of consistency create such profound silence? The answer isn't difficult. Because Patel didn't just have Ted Lieu in front of him. There were cameras. There were recordings. There were words spoken in the past. And they were all speaking at once. That's why this moment was significant for the balance of power in Washington. Because for the first time, the evasive answer didn't work. And everyone watching realized this wasn't just a lie. This was the lie becoming unsustainable. If you've watched this far, you can like the video to show your support. It's important for moments like this to be visible, not for the algorithm, but to be recorded. The media framed this moment differently. Some called it a tough questioning. Some called it a political attack. But no one could deny this. Patel couldn't answer. And that says a lot for an FBI director. Because an FBI director's greatest asset is credibility. Once it's cracked, it's not easy to repair. What Ted Lieu did was this. He didn't accuse Patel. He didn't expose Patel. He just made him talk. And sometimes that's the most dangerous thing. That's why this headline is accurate. One lie, total collapse. Because sometimes one lie can bring down all the defenses built up over time. This moment will be remembered in the future. Perhaps when the Epstein files are discussed. Perhaps when leaks come from within the FBI. Perhaps when Patel's term of office is debated. But one thing is clear. This was the first clear moment Patel lost control, and the cameras were there. At the end of the video, I want to ask this. Do you think this was just a moment or the beginning of something bigger? Share your thoughts in the comments. Different opinions matter. Discussion is more valuable than silencing. And if you enjoy this kind of analysis, you might consider subscribing to the channel, because this story doesn't end here. Finally, remember this. Sometimes big scandals don't come out with shouting, but with silence. Lieu didn't shout that day, but something collapsed. And that collapse concerns not just one person, but an entire institution. If you've made it this far, you might consider sharing the video. Moments like these fade away silently. When shared, they are preserved. It's also not a bad idea to turn on notifications, because this story unfolds in pieces. Because what we call collapse doesn't happen in a single moment. That moment only becomes visible. The silence in the Congress Hall was actually the outward expression of tension that had been building for a long time. Lieu didn't do anything that day. He didn't trigger anything. He just brought out what was already there. And that's why it was effective. For Patel, the problem wasn't failing to answer a single question. The problem was that the answers could no longer carry each other. There was no bridge left between what was said in the past and what is said today. And when that bridge collapses, it is impossible to cross to the other side. That is why the audience felt something very different from the word lie, a loss of control. The person at the head of an institution, in front of the cameras, resorting to notes, evasive sentences, general statements. This is not a personal moment, but an institutional alarm. And this alarm sounds silently. The media generally loves explosions, shouting, harsh outbursts, headline-grabbing words. But this event was not like that. Here the headline was not what was said, but what could not be said. It was the hesitation of an FBI director in the face of the most basic question of consistency. That's why this moment turned into humor on social media. Memes, short clips, sarcastic posts. But beneath the humor lay a much more serious concern. Who does this institution really serve? Because trust doesn't disappear just by shouting. Trust melts away when there is no response. We need to stop here and ask, is this unique to Patel, or is it part of a larger transformation? The erosion of reputation experienced by American institutions in recent years becomes apparent precisely in moments like this, when no explanation is given, when a question goes unanswered, when an official chooses to remain silent, and these silences accumulate. If other examples come to mind as you follow this analysis, write them in the comments. This discussion is not limited to a single name. Institutions can only be held accountable when they are discussed. Because ultimately, we come to this. This is not a matter of who is right. This is a matter of who is accountable. Lieu didn't shout that day, but he created a void. And that void wasn't filled with an answer. That's why this story isn't over. That's why this moment mattered. And that's why, when something happens in the future, a leak, a statement, a file, people will look back to this moment. This is where the first crack appeared, they'll say. If you like the video, you can leave a small donation. You don't have to subscribe and stay, but if you do, we'll keep capturing these quiet moments together.